Welcome, everyone, to the Ghost Helpers podcast. I'm your host, Tina Erwin, and I am here with my sidekick, Chloe Scolaro. And we've had a very weird and strange day and a lot of problems even getting to this moment to talk to you.
Yes, that is
So,
true.
our topic today, as we hit part 2 of starting your spiritual path, is when you're on your path and a lot of things are happening around you, how do you deal with the day to day when you're supposed to be super spiritual? Have Chloe, have you found that that's a kind of a challenging thing?
Yes, I do. I do feel that can be very challenging sometimes, man. And you're supposed to have all the answers, or you're supposed to be enlightened or whatever, and then you get in your car and you put your coffee on top of the car, and then you're thinking about so many different things. You drive off with your coffee on the trunk, or you're doing all this silly stuff, and aren't you supposed to be the Zen master, and you're supposed to have all the answers, and you're supposed to be there for everybody else, but then you're there for everybody else, and all of a sudden you're losing your own faculties.
Well, when you're on a spiritual path, you better hope you're not a master because then you can't ever make a mistake.
Right.
If you're just a person on the path, then you look at the mistakes that you're making, or maybe they're not mistakes. Maybe it's the things that you're learning because you had an experience. And if you don't call them mistakes or errors, I had an experience and I'm trying to learn from it, then as someone else approaches you with their experience, then you get to say, oh, believe me, I have an appreciation for what you're going through, but tell me what's happening. I mean, it sounds like, as we talked about this before we started, maybe that's happened to you recently.
That definitely happens to me a lot. I feel like a lot of the things that I go through in my life, I always go through about 3 to 6 months before the people closest to me go through it. So then when it's their turn, I seem to be like, oh, don't worry, I'm the subject matter expert in this one. Or here's what helped me get through it. Or I completely understand how you feel because X, Y, and Z. So a lot of life experience that I've been through has come through and been super helpful when the people that I love or that I care about are going through the same thing. So it makes me a better listener. It makes me a better communicator and better friend. And while no situation is the same, and obviously I'm not going through exactly what they went through or vice versa, I can at least approach the situation with a compassionate, understanding background, having been through it myself.
Okay, so that means that you're you are embracing the role of listener, and it's active listening. And if somebody's explaining their problem, their husband cheated on them, or their girlfriend, you know, it's a betrayal, or I said something and now I don't have a friend anymore and I don't understand what's happening, or my husband asked me for a divorce and I'm devastated. These are very big things in the life of another person. And if you fall over the waterfall with them, you're worthless to them. So, one of the roles on your spiritual path is learning how to be a friend and stay in a place of detached compassion. It's not up to you to solve the problem. Maybe the real function is to help you to let that person talk it out so they can work through it. And then you provide maybe, it's a Navy thing, a couple of rudder orders that might help them stay in a more balanced place. Does that kind of make sense? So she's nodding her head, and if you're listening to this, you can't hear her nod her head.
Sorry, I said yes. Sorry. I think that that is a difficult thing to do, though. I almost feel like being on a spiritual path comes with a sense of a heightened level of not only responsibility but maturity, and that sometimes can be really hard too. I think I struggle with that like anybody else does, where you can't fix it for them, right? You're supposed to be that listening ear and be that friend, but I'm not going to sit here and tell you that I didn't get off the phone with some of my friends this week after they were talking to me and I wasn't mad. I was angry, almost angry like it was happening to me. Obviously it wasn't, but you just get so, upset for the people that you love and that you care about, and you have to be really careful not to let that bleed into your everyday life. And I say maturity because sometimes you're going to watch people go through things and you have to know to just stay in your lane. You can't say anything. You just have to let them do certain things because certain things are karmic or certain things are just the way it has to play out. And that stinks.
Oh, it's very difficult. I call it detached compassion. Because with detached compassion, people want you to commiserate with them, but you have to be detached enough not to fall over the waterfall with them. And sometimes the things that you're hearing are so hard to hear. And yes, it makes you angry. I've had clients where they told me something that happened to them that was so horrific. I literally felt like I should bite on a piece of wood because I was going to just I was going to burst into tears on the phone. And that's not helpful to the client. The challenge is that I'm human. This was so horrible. I mean, I really love children. And to think that this could happen to someone's child is very hard to hear. But that my job isn't to, become a puddle while I'm on the phone. My job is to listen and help that person make sense and to provide
to
words
of
for them. So I think we have
I think we have an echo.
Oh, do we?
Yeah.
Is it better?
Put that in, huh?
I did. I tried to just, see if I can credit. We've had a lot of technical difficulties with this.
We've had a lot of time. Yeah. I think somebody doesn't want us to talk about this, so we're going to keep going.
Yeah. We kind of decided that despite maybe being outside of our usual comforts, I don't know if you're okay with talking about it. I can't get my headphones to work. Tina had to switch her computer over. We really kind of went through it trying to get this going, but it was important to talk about. And usually when obstacles come up, it means that you need to talk about it more. So like we said, everything happens for a reason.
Yeah. Let's keep going. And again, that's an explanation. We've had one technical difficulty after the other.
Yep.
And neither of us got mad about it. We were questioning, does this mean we shouldn't do it? Does this mean we should do it? And we decided that this was a term we use, an interference thing, and that because it's an interference thing, this needs to be said. When you're on a spiritual path, it's not just there are dangers on the path for you. People start to see you differently. And I think that's kind of what you're experiencing. You're the listener as people come to you. And we were both in the Navy, so we both have dealt with crew members and fellow Navy people and listen to the things that happen to them. And depending on what your role is, sometimes you have to either help them deal with it or counsel them so they can change a behavior pattern so that the bad thing that got them into mischief in the first place does not repeat itself.
Right.
I mean, you can write a whole book about the things that happened when I was in the Navy.
That's my entire job, so I get it.
Well, I mean, some very strange things. So you're listening to someone tell you that this bad thing happened, or let's take the case of it could be a friend, it could be a family member, it could be one of your own children, and they come to you and say, "Oh my gosh, my marriage is falling apart and I'm devastated. And you look at when did it start, and you listen to them and they're crushed. You took a vow, and the vow was important to you, and you were trying to be loyal. But there comes a point, let's just use this as an example, where there's a fork in the road. You want to go one way and this person wants to go the other way, or the direction you're going, they can't go there. They can't walk that path with you. And I don't know how many people go through life and not have an experience in theme and variation with this. If you're walking that path and you have a person who you promise to love and obey, and they can't go where you're going, then maybe one of the things you can explain to them is sometimes the karma of a relationship is just over. That's not right or wrong or good or bad or anything to have a judgment over. The karma of the relationship is exhausted. You each go your own way. That I'm not going into what happens if it's an angry, brutal, abusive situation. I'm talking at a very fundamental, simple level that this divorce has happened. You're heartbroken. This person's going through hell. This person may have found somebody else, or this person may feel that they don't love you anymore, or they don't love your friend anymore. And you have the righteous indignation. But if you stepped back and said, well, maybe the karma between us is over. Maybe that person didn't know how to tell me, or they don't understand what they're experiencing, which is probably, the most likely. They have no idea what they're experiencing. So consequently, they just know that it's not working anymore. Mm-hmm. So you're supposed to help this person with the hurt feelings. So when you're saying to them, I'm so sorry this is happening to you. I can't even imagine what you're feeling. Oh, my heart goes out to you. And maybe you recommend some remedies like Stress or Star of Bethlehem for grief, which is a Bach flower remedy, or rescue remedy for the mountainous stress the person's going through. So it helps rebalance them emotionally on a lot of levels. So they're not using drugs, they're using a homeopathic. It's very simple, it's a very gentle remedy. Star Bethlehem or walnut or some of these others, again, are Bach flower remedies. So when they're going through that and they have sleepless nights, and sometimes they call you and say, I just need to blow off steam. Say, you know what? Go ahead. I'm listening. And they have to work through it because now they're grieving. So if you're helping a person through a grieving process, that takes its toll on you. But again, you're not falling over the waterfall. And after a period of time, you can help introduce the concept that what if it happened because there's something in the future that's going to work out better for you. And one of the shows we're going to do is on feng shui. But in feng shui, something has to end for something to begin. So you can't start a new path with maybe a new person until this particular experience or this relationship ends. And if this person says, but I loved them, I made a commitment, I can understand that. I hear you. But sometimes, and just try this concept on for size. Remember, you're not forcing them to accept your concept. You're just saying, I'm throwing it out there. See how it feels. Try it on. Maybe you're not ready to think about it. Maybe you are. But maybe it's not about betrayal as much as it's the karma between you is just done. And maybe there is a much more meaningful relationship in your future. And good luck in feng shui is being ready, accepting what is not going to change, and then moving forward with it. Those are some ideas you can use if you have to talk to someone about a really difficult situation. And I have certainly been through that. And I had a situation where someone close to me got a divorce, and it felt catastrophic and deeply personal and so hurtful. And yet they did their best to part as friends. 9 years later, she's engaged to an amazing person. She's absolutely on cloud nine. He is her intellectual equal. And so they're about to go and have this happy life. Her ex-husband is doing whatever it is that he's doing, and he's living his best life because the karma between them's over. There's no further contact. So even though you're not telling a future, because really good spiritual practitioners don't tell futures, they open a door to a potential future. So I know that's a long explanation. How does that feel for you?
I think that's a really great way to say that. As I'm listening to you talk, the only caveat I could think is where that maturity piece comes in, is that sometimes you do have such good antidotes and you do have, such good answers and advice, but people aren't ready to hear that. Like, I have a couple friends right now, they're in some situations that when you were talking about how you see a fork in the road and you see how somebody has, like that person can't go with them. I have the same situation, except I almost feel like from a bird's eye view, I can see why there are breakdowns in communication in a relationship. So between a husband and wife, I can see the husband side of it, and then I can see the wife side of it. And then I know it's almost like you can like see a map, right? You almost see like these, when you look at like a circuit board, how like you flip circuits and stuff is connecting. I almost feel like, well, if you said this to this person, then like maybe like all the things you're saying to me, great. But if you said them to them, maybe that would make a difference. Oh, I'm not ready to do that. Somebody said something to me that was so profound, and like you can't argue with it. They said, I'm not ready to be vulnerable with somebody that isn't choosing me. What are you going to say to that? Are you going to say to them, you need to be vulnerable because, no, you just have to like, yeah, that's a really good point. It's almost having to, being in that position, learn how to hold space for your friends to just not be ready, and that's where your maturity piece comes in, because maybe if some people are a little bit less advanced in that way, they could be like, well, this is what you need to do. You can't do that. You got to let them come to their own understanding, and you have to just kind of sit in it. So I was on a phone call this week with somebody where I just sat there. That's all they needed. They didn't need to talk about anything. They didn't need to, talk it out. They just were doing their regular life and dealing with their animals and their kids. And this person is like really going through a lot. And I almost was sitting there feeling like I'm uncomfortable. Like listening to you go through what you're going through is uncomfortable for me. But sometimes being a good friend is being uncomfortable for the sake of sitting on the phone with somebody that needs it. That's a big deal too. Like you want to fix it for them. You want to hop in, you want to make it better. But sometimes it's just saying, man, you're really going through something and I hate that for you. And it makes me sad, but all I can do for you right now is sit here and listen to you talk, or listen to you eat dinner or make dinner and not talk because you need somebody to be there. And that's what I'm going to do. And that's a hard thing for people, I think, sometimes.
That's a really good point. Men want to go in and fix things. Men don't necessarily want to talk about it. Women only want to talk about it. And if they're talking about it to you and they're fixated on betrayal or anger, you can't just snap your fingers and they're over it. You grieve. The end of a relationship is a death for that person. So you're going to grieve it for as long as it takes. And there isn't necessarily going to be a quick answer. So if you're the person that says, I don't have all the answers, but I am here to listen and I'm keeping your confidence. And I understand this is so hard and you're showing so much courage. Go ahead, tell me how you feel. And then you just listen, and it's exhausting for you sometimes. Or let's say that this person's parents all of a sudden are getting a divorce and they don't know where they fit in this, because a divorce, especially when you have either teenage or adult children, is love betrayed. The whole structure of your life feels like it's just falling apart. What do you do with that? Sometimes the best you can do is listen. And I had a client who lost 8 relatives in 6 weeks.
Oh my gosh.
And I mean, when you deal with multiple death, it doesn't happen to everybody, thank goodness, but it does happen. And she was drowning in managing estates. I don't even know how she did it. So she would call me, and all I could do is tell her she's doing a great job and be a cheering section. Sometimes somebody just wants you to be a cheering section. You don't have to solve the problem, because not yours to do, and you can't. And maybe if somebody says, I don't know how to deal with this grief of, my parents' divorce or the death of all of these people, you can remind them, and this is in the grief book, The Lightworker's Guide to Healing Grief, that it takes 20 miles to stop a supertanker or an aircraft carrier. 20 miles, because it's a science that you have the continual momentum, even when you cut the engines. The momentum of the relationship just going to keep going. You can't stop an aircraft carrier or a supertanker on a dime. Can't stop a sailboat on a dime. Even if you drop an anchor, you're going to drag the anchor for a while, and then you could really damage your ship or your boat. It takes time for the energy of a relationship or a death or the loss of a job. You got fired. You got laid off. The injustice of it, the betrayal of it. It takes time for the momentum and the energy of that to come to a stop. Even if you hit, all stop, it's going to take a little time. And you're patient with your friend, and that may be the very best you can do.
What is the karma attached to, I guess, being an active listener? I don't know if that's a silly question or not, or maybe the question I actually want to ask. But, I guess you were talking about listening being a huge spiritual service. Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
When you are speaking to someone about something that is deeply troubling to you, you're opening your heart, and there's a part of you that's very vulnerable. Maybe you're revealing a fear that I'll never love again.
Yep.
If your child dies, there's a fear that somehow it's your fault. Somehow you weren't the perfect parent. If your friendship ends and you felt betrayed, did I do something wrong? What happened? And so you have this, it doesn't matter what the situation is. There's a kaleidoscope of emotion. And when you're the active listener, people want you to agree with them. Maybe you see it differently, but when they're in the injustice mode of the moment, telling them, well, maybe if only you had, or it might have been better if you did, is going to turn you instantly into an enemy. Whatever your opinion is, it's irrelevant now. It's over. Whatever has happened has happened. Maybe I have a client who I was, concerned about, and this person made decisions. I was super concerned about those decisions because, I mean, you don't have to be a psychic to see what's going to happen in the future at some point. And just because you can see the future doesn't mean it's absolutely going to turn out that way, but sometimes it does. Running around saying, "See, I told you so," not helpful. You can then, when you get them to a place, you might be able to say, I know you're suffering, but man, what a learning experience you're going through. And
Right.
if they mean learning experience, well, obviously, you must have learned a lot from this, and I can't even imagine how hard this is for you. And then sometimes you don't even have to say that. You can say, "I'm so sorry this happened to you." Sometimes you can hug them if they're physically present and they're not 4,000 miles away or something. And you tell them that your heart goes out to them. "I'm so sorry this happened to you. Tell me how you feel. I'm sending you angels," and then really mentally request angels go to this person and say, "I'm wrapping you in my love, and I'm sending the angels to wrap you in love." And go ahead and cry. Don't be intimidated by tears. A lot of people freak out when someone cries. But we have salty tears because salt is cleansing, whether it's your tears or the ocean. Listening means a kindness, a caring. And is it taxing for you? Yes. If you're resentful of it, maybe you aren't the best person for them to be talking to. If what they're going through, maybe it's triggering something for you. Maybe something happened to you too. When my niece died, my sister has helped many different people when they talk to her about the loss of their children. Well, we've done so much work that it's not triggering her. Could she cry over the death of her child 20 years later, 23 years later? Yeah, she sure could. But she doesn't anymore. Death comes. So this active listening, when you're on a spiritual path, means that you're doing spiritual service. And it doesn't mean you're sitting on a mountaintop meditating to heal the world. Sometimes it's just being of service to the person in front of you.
Something that you mentioned earlier that I've thought about a lot in my life, actually, funny enough. I am in my mid to late 20s, and I am incredibly lucky to have never lost anybody close to me to death. Thank God. But there are people that I've known growing up that have lost so many people, like every year in the anywhere between 3 and 5 people, or sometimes even smaller than that. Like you were saying, 8 relatives in 6 weeks. That's insane. And I know people like that just are experiencing loss after loss after loss. And I've often thought, like, man, like my family's pretty lucky. Like, none of us have really lost anybody. I mean, my grandparents are 91 and 87, and their oldest child is in her late 60s. Like, to be that old and not have lost a parent, that's insane. Like, I feel very fortunate, and we feel very fortunate. And I know that there are people that experience loss like crazy. And you mentioned something earlier that some people have that kind of karma. Why do some people experience so much loss in their life and others don't?
Well, when you experience loss, you have to learn how to deal with loss. Not because I say so, but because it is a karmic opportunity to learn how to process grief, to recognize that something has ended so that something new can go to a place of becoming. And when you are grieving a person, your grief, not all grief is the same. if your parents are in their 90s or their late 90s or approaching 100, there's a part of you that you know that death is coming, because just the statistics tell you that. But you know they've had 97 wonderful years, an amazing life, experienced so much love, such a great family, that when that person dies, you're going to miss them and love them, but your grief is different than if your 6-year-old child drops dead. It's a completely, radically different experience. And karma gives us this entire buffet of experiences, not as punishment, but because it's an experience. How we respond to the experience enables us to grow spiritually and enables us to make giant steps on our spiritual path. If your relative is murdered, no matter what their age, there is a cloak of injustice that seems to hang on your shoulders for a very long time. If your relative took their own life, there's a feeling of guilt, rage, betrayal. And all those emotions are about you. They're not about understanding why the person left when they did, or what they might have experienced. When you study grief, not all grief is the same. It doesn't last the same amount of time for each person, because each experience is unique. If you have a person who is experiencing horrible suffering, they died an awful death, then part of you is not going to have the same amount of grief, because now you're so grateful that they're out of pain, that they're not suffering anymore. And if someone was hideously cruel and you had to grit your teeth to have them as a family member, and that person dies by whatever means, you have mixed feelings.
Right.
The natural part of you is like, oh, thank God that person's not in my life anymore. Then I'm glad they're dead. I'm going to say it. I'm glad they're dead. And then you offer that person, all right, what did you learn from this super cruel person? Their life has meaning only as it relates to what the cruelty that person evinced offered you.
Mm-hmm.
So if someone goes bankrupt, they lose everything. If you're dealing with like the people in the Palisades, or, North Carolina in 2024, where they, in a blink of an eye, they lost everything, or the fires in California in 2003 and 2007, when entire neighborhoods went up in flames except one house. Everything around them, I know you saw that. Everything around them burned to the ground, and this house in the middle of all that isn't touched. For whatever the reason, the karma of that family didn't include their house being burned down. It's when you're studying the spiritual path and you're trying to help other people, it's a really good idea to study karma. And I have 3 books on karma, the Lightworker's Guide to Everyday Karma, and Karma and Frequency, and Soul Evolution. All of them discuss the karma of various situations.
So where do you get, because I thought about this, but I was like, maybe this is a question for another show, but you just brought it up.
Okay.
When you say karma is not like pen, where you pick up this pen and I'm touching this pen, or like chapstick, here's my chapstick, I'm going to put it on. We talk about karma, and it's almost this thing in the air. Like, what is karma? Where do you get your information from? How do we know? Because karma's not tangible, but we talk about it like it should be. But
it is tangible. If karma is a physics principle of action and reaction.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's the first law of thermodynamics. For every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. It's like energy is neither created nor destroyed, which, by the way, explains a ghost. But for every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. And the little puzzle piece that people miss is that karma has eternity to offer you the reaction of your actions. Sometimes it's instant, and we've all seen that in traffic or in a crazy situation. Well, we've also seen it where it looks like there's no justice. This person got away with murder. And so there's no justice. But karma is always just. And this esoteric concept, which is what you're really talking about, action and reaction. You know, if you punch a hole in a tire, that's the action. The reaction is flat tire.
Mm-hmm.
If you tell their children they're dumb, fat, stupid, and ugly, and they grow up to be obese,
stupid and ugly,
that they can't hold a job, that's the reaction, but it's going to take you 20 years to see it.
Yeah, that's very hard.
Children that you love them, you believe in them, and you're gently guiding them to find their best place, and they're successful adults. Well, the karmic action was how you guided your children with love and wisdom. The reaction is strong, responsible adults who are raising their children with love and wisdom. That's action and reaction. People think karma is a bad thing. It is not a bad thing. It is. It's not right or wrong or good or bad. It's the reaction to an action that might have taken place 100 or 1,000 years ago, and you don't know it. So when you feel like the world is unjust, it's not unjust. Karma, I mean, I can't tell you how many books I've read on karma, because I had to understand it for myself, so that understanding lives within you. And for me personally, karma is a facet of faith. And my wonderful topaz here that I bought in Brazil has some.
I was looking. That's beautiful.
Wonderful facets. I can see it here. Well, one of the facets of faith is accepting karma. And I think that's, if you're on a spiritual path and your faith says there's no such thing as karma, you know that's not true, because you believe in action and reaction. You know that's an undeniable situation. So now you've looked at it differently and you said, okay, there is such a thing as karma. It's a Sanskrit word for reaction and reaction, action and reaction. So maybe the person had really horrible things happen to them in childhood. And then they realize that their marriage is predicated on repeating what their parents did. And if it comes up like, well, you know, this happened to my mother, and it's like, whoa. Really? What happened in that situation? And as you're, not that you're going to be a counselor or anything, but you're tugging on that string. And then if you have a conversation, well, I wonder if we're there with this, is there anything similar to your parents' marriage that you saw in the marriage that just ended? And if they say, yeah, I guess so. Well, then if you are not feeling capable of guiding them, you can refer them to someone who can help them understand they repeated a pattern.
I know so many people that make the joke, I married my mother, you know?
Well, that's why the Big Bang Theory is hysterical, because in the Big Bang Theory, Leonard hated his mother, so he gets a roommate who's just exactly like his mother. And it took him a while to break that pattern of seeking to be with someone who is rigid and controlling. And
Go ahead. There's a book that a therapist friend of mine recommended to me, and it's called The New Rules of Marriage. And in there, it's written by a marriage counselor. They wrote, you marry your unfinished business. Everybody marries their unfinished business, or you get into relationships with your unfinished business. So whatever you need to work on in your life, or whatever you're still working on or struggling with, your partner ends up being a mirror to that.
I think that's a very astute observation. I think that's absolutely true.
Right.
And you're repeating the pattern that your parents had. And I remember I caught myself saying something to my husband that my mother had said to my father. And I had finally reached a level of awareness where I could see it. And I went, oh my gosh, and I said it out loud, I'm not choosing to repeat this pattern. I apologized to my husband. And I found some of my reactions to things were based on something that had happened to me in childhood. They didn't bear relevance to what was happening at this moment, and he didn't do anything wrong.
Right.
So I had to change. And this is where those of us who are on a spiritual path have to come to terms with a very important truth. And that is, you cannot change anyone else. You can only change yourself. Now let's go back to karma. You change, you develop insight, you do some spiritual work, you're struggling, you're dealing with it, and you change. Well, that's the action. The reaction now is everybody around you is responding to your change. And I have to say, about 99% of the time, it's an amazing reaction. I had a client who had, horrible mother. I hear this every day, a horrible, horrible mother. And she was determined. She had a lot of insight. She wasn't going to be the cruel person her mother was. So she was kind to her mother, even though this was an abusive person. And there were a lot of different problems with her children, her adult children. And then things started happening with her husband. And it was this massive weight. And she felt like she was drowning. And she said, I don't know what to do. And I said, you're going to have to work with somebody, me or somebody else. But you can't keep going like this. Because if you do, it will drown you. And it will exacerbate the current depression you're under. So we started working. And it took a couple months. But we stopped the energy of the super tanker, brought it to all stop, charted a new course, new behaviors, new responses to the stimuli, new methods of dealing with her toxic mother and some toxic children and friends. And all of a sudden, she began to feel better. Her mother's still toxic. She can't change her mother, but her reaction to her mother gave her her power back. Huge. She changed her reaction to her children. She took her power back, and they're doing immensely better. And with her husband, her relationship with her husband, which was already really excellent, improved greatly. She's happier. She feels like, I can't change this person, and that's okay. That's not my job. So I guided her to gently lifting this burden that somehow she was supposed to fix this. Not your job to fix it. Not your job. So you can't change anyone else. You can only change yourself. You can't want something from someone like she wanted from her mother if that person doesn't want that for themselves. Her mother didn't want to change. You also can't want something from another person that they have no capacity to give you. Huge. Huge. That person they have no insight. They're never going to change. And a woman who had a husband with 400 affairs, he wrote them all down. I couldn't believe it. He was not a bad man. He had a horrific childhood. I'm surprised he wasn't a serial killer. One of the kindest men you'd ever want to meet, but he was looking for love in every face. And once I could get her to understand that, then her rage stopped poisoning her, because your rage only hurts you. It's not going to hurt the other person unless you make it physical. And over time, she was able to forgive him. And that's something you have to be very careful of karmically. A lot of people say, just forgive them and you're going to feel so much better. I got a news flash for you. That is not true.
That's not how that works.
It's not how it works. Forgiveness can only come when you're ready, when you've taken the lesson from the experience, when you've embraced the lesson, when it lives within you, and now you can release this person and you're still in balance. And no one can dictate that to you.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that this keeping things in balance is important. And yes, we marry people who are going to challenge us in so many ways. I was fortunate. I married the love of my life. Did it not mean we had things to overcome and work through and learn? Oh my God, yes. But I wouldn't trade a single thing. I got to learn about myself. I got to learn about this amazing man I married. And I got to see the humanness of each of us. We're all vulnerable to things. What happened to us as children? It makes a really big difference as we grow up, changing the pattern, changing the pattern. When you're so close to it, you can see it. You just see it. That's why when you work with someone, you begin to pull back, and now you see the whole mosaic of your life through different eyes.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're on a spiritual path, it's a learning path. You're not just going to do the same thing every day. And you have now told the universe that you're welcoming and accepting a lot of difficult challenges. But the rewards on the other end are beyond measure.
You're always a student. That's what I always say. Forever a student.
Well, that keeps it does a lot if you're, again, on this path. Unless you're some amazing master, and there's like one or two people on earth who are living masters. I mean, that can hardly count them on one hand. The rest of us, we are all students on the path. It keeps your ego in check. It reminds us to be humble. It reminds us when anger flares up, we're human. When Christ walked the earth, even he got to feel what happens when anger flares up. Helped him to understand, human beings, mortal man in a slightly more three-dimensional light. Yes, we had this amazing, remarkable being walk among us, and that enabled him to understand us even better. So if you're praying to God, or you're praying to Christ, or you're praying to some wonderful benign deity, recognize that you've now connected to the divine. And if you have a friend who's in a dire strait and you say, I'll pray for you, be very clear what prayer you're saying, which is why the Crossing Over Prayer book has a whole bunch of amazing prayers for people who are going through a divorce or who are grieving anything and who are suffering. So you don't necessarily have to think of the prayer. But if you do come up with a prayer yourself, that's going to be wonderful.
I think that's great. I think everybody could use a little more prayer.
Well, look at it again from a karmic viewpoint. For every action, you're saying a prayer for another person. You're sending it through the ether, which has no encumbrance of time or space. prayer operates in a different dimension, which is a really kind of mind-blowing concept. When it operates in that different dimension, it goes to the person instantly. And somebody said, what does prayer do when you're grieving the loss of a child? And a lot of people said they would pray for us. And I believe that they did. And I believe that their prayers enabled us to think about what we had to do each day to be able to get up and face the towering grief. This family of 4 is now a family of 3. To face the people that went, well, what happened? Why did she die? And they don't mean to be accusatory, but you have to face their eyes because you're really seeing their fear that they're praying it won't happen to them, because the worst has already happened to you. And, they don't want it to happen to them. And I get it. I understand. They don't mean to be critical. It's just fear.
Right.
So we have the experiences we have so that we can be the people we're meant to be. And the more we accept and embrace the experience, it's like squeezing a lemon. It seems really sour, but if you get every last ounce of juice, you add a little sweetness from your own personality, you have a really healthy drink. And you have something that's going to help you because now you've learned. You can apply that experience. And that's why there are collisions, maritime collisions, because somebody obviously didn't learn a previous lesson. So now they will.
Right.
Safety is based on all the mistakes people have previously made.
Rules are written in blood.
Rules are written in blood, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Laws are written in blood too. So
Karmic law. No, I'm kidding.
Karmic law is inviolate. I mean, I know we're looking around at a lot of corruption right now, a lot of horrific things that we're seeing on the news. And this is deeply upsetting to people. And it should be. You can still send healing to the world. You can still ask God to cleanse the world of the darkness, because your request sets karmic action in motion. You're not helpless in the face of this. You have the power to bring about wonderful change. I think that's a really big deal. And I think that if we can understand that, maybe when we're praying, we can be a little more purposeful and understand what we're doing.
Yeah, I agree. Intention is everything.
Absolutely. Any more thoughts about today, or you feel like we're good?
I think that we covered a lot of interesting stuff, and I have a ton more questions, but they don't pertain to this specifically. So I think we'll have to cover that in another topic. But hopefully we got out what we were supposed to get out. We already talked about how today was kind of a weird technical day. So I hope that we have achieved the goal we set out to achieve, even though we didn't know what that was. So I know we talked about karma, and maybe we'll see the reaction of our conversation here soon.
Because a spiritual path is not for the faint-hearted. If you embarked on it, then there must be a piece of steel in your backbone that takes you to a place that you really want to go to the next level, but you have to earn it along the way. So Chloe, thank you as always for being my partner in this, and for asking these really important questions and facilitating the discussion, because the give and take is part of relationship, going back and forth and listening and answering the question asked, not the question we wish was asked. So thank you again for that. And for all of you listening, please like and subscribe to the YouTube channel if you're watching this. And I hope that everyone has gotten something from this that was of spiritual service to them today. We're not going to answer everybody's question, and we don't have all the answers. We're just offering some ideas that might make life a better place. So to reach me, contact at ghosthelpers.com reaches me. And if you saw this video and you want to leave a comment, I do look at the comments and eventually answer them. So thank you all. And I hope you all have a great evening. Bye-bye.
Bye.